Welcome to the first day of the Casey Sewalong, where I will be sewing the Casey boxer short or pant step by step with you. Now, one thing to note here is I am actually sewing up 4 different pairs, 2 shorts, 2 pants, 2 with pockets, 2 without, just so that I can go over all of the options and all of the views. So you might see me switching between fabrics during the sew along. Now the first thing that we want to do here is we want to make sure that we have transferred all of the notches and markings from our pattern pieces to our fabric. So for notches, I just do a little 1/4 inch snip at all of the different notch points. Keep in mind that the seam allowance is a 1/2 inch on this sewing pattern, so make sure that your notches are about 1/4 inch so that they do not get into the stitch line. And then next up for the dot markings on the pattern, I like to just use a pin, and then I use these ultra washable Crayola markers, but use whatever marking tool that you prefer. Now one thing to keep in mind is that some of the dots are for just the shorts views, some of the dots are just for the pockets, and then some of the dots like these ones here at the faux fly are for all of the views. So I just stick the pin through all layers, and then I take my marking tool and then I just make a little mark where that pin sits on both sides of the fabric. Okay, so now that all the markings are transferred, we're going to go ahead and start sewing. So with right sides touching, we are going to pin the front to the back at the inner leg seam. Now I'm doing the shorts view here, but the steps are the same for the pants views as well, obviously just longer. So I'm going to put a few pins in here, and then I'm going to go over to my sewing machine, and at a normal 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to stitch that from top to bottom, back stitching at both ends. And then once those are both sewn, we are going to finish those seam allowances. You can do this in whatever your preferred method is, but I'm going to do it by serging it. And then depending on how you finished it, you're going to either press those seam allowances open, or if you serged it like me, you are going to press those to one side. Now, if you are serging like me or zigzag stitching the seam allowances together, one tip that I have is just to press the seam allowances of one leg towards the front and one leg towards the back. That just reduces a bit of the bulk at the crotch seam. Next up, we are going to go over to the faux fly, and we are going to press between the top notch and then those 2 dots at the faux fly. This is actually the center front seam. So just go ahead and fold over along those connecting lines, and then give it a good press and steam, and then you can open it back up. This is just a temporary line that we are going to use a little bit later when we're stitching the center front seam. And of course, make sure that you're doing it on the other side as well. Now the rest of today is going to be dedicated to pockets and then hemming the shorts view. So if you are sewing up the pants view and no pockets, you're done for today. If you are showing up shorts, no pockets, then you can just skip over the next few steps where we are talking about pockets, but at the end of today we are going to be hemming the shorts, so make sure that you circle back for that. You can tune back in at the 9-minute mark for hemming. But if you are adding pockets to your shorts or pants, go ahead and grab all 4 of your pocket pieces, and we are going to finish the outside curved edge. So we're going to leave that side and top edge alone. You can do this by either zigzag stitching it or do it like I am doing, where I'm going to serge this edge. Just make sure that when you are doing this, you are not actually trimming down the edge of the pocket, because that will change the size and the seam allowance. So you are just serging or zigzag stitching just along the edge without trimming it at all. Okay, and now with right sides touching, we are going to pin each of the pockets to a coordinating front or back side seam. So just make sure that you are matching the side pocket notches to the side seam, and then I'm going to pin it in a few places, and then we're going to go over to our sewing machine and we are going to stitch this, but instead of stitching it at the normal 1/2 inch seam allowance, we are stitching this at 3/8 of an inch. So just slightly inside of the seam allowance. This is intentional, and this helps these pockets to kind of stay tucked inside of the side seam once they're all constructed. And just to reiterate here, we are just doing that stitching from the top to the bottom of the pocket, not along the entire side seam. Just attaching the pocket to each of the side seams, right sides touching at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, once you have done this to all 4 of the pockets, all 4 of the side seams, so that's the front and the back of each leg, we are going to go and we are going to actually finish the entire side seam allowance of each front and back side seam. Now, I'm going to be doing this by serging. You can also zigzag stitch it. You could use pinking shears if you want. Just keep in mind that you want to make sure that you are once again not actually trimming down that seam allowance. So you are just finishing it without trimming from top to bottom on all 4 of the side seams. Okay, and this is what it should look like. So you should have finished all 4 of the side seams, also catching the pocket side seam in that finishing. Now that those are all finished, we are going to understitch the pockets just to keep them once again tucked inside of the garment. So press each of the pockets away from the main garment and over the seam allowances. And once we have pressed that, we are going to go over to our sewing machine and we are going to stitch just inside of the seam where the pocket meets the garment. And that is going to go through both the pocket and then also those seam allowances, and that will be the understitching on each of the 4 pocket edges. Okay, and this is what it should look like. I know it's kind of hard to see that stitching, but that stitching is just inside of that pocket edge, catching the seam allowances underneath. Now, if you are sewing up the pants view of the Casey, you are actually done for today. You can come back tomorrow where we tackle the faux fly. But if you are sewing up a shorts view, then we are actually going to continue on for just a few more minutes today, and we are going to tackle the hem of the shorts view. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to fold up the bottom edge, wrong sides touching, by a 1/4 of an inch. Now, you can be much more precise than I am, and you can actually measure this. I'm pretty good at eyeballing this kind of thing, so I'm just going to just fold up that bottom edge, wrong sides touching once again, all the way across the front and the back, and I'm going to press and steam that. Okay, and then now we're going to press it up again, this time by 1 inch, which that folded edge should actually hit right at about that dot marking that marks our side slit that we'll be creating a little bit later. But go ahead and press it up by 1 inch, wrong sides touching all the way across the bottom of the leg. You might want to use a ruler like I am here just to make sure that I'm doing it at about 1 inch. And then go ahead and put in a few pins just to make sure that everything stays in place. And then we're going to go over to our sewing machine and we are going to stitch just along that inside folded edge from one end to the other, back stitching at both ends, and that creates the hem of our shorts. Now this probably goes without saying, but make sure that you have done this for both of the legs of your Casey shorts. And then once you have finished this, I just like to give everything, one last good press, but we're actually done for today. This is what it should look like. Come back tomorrow.